product is no longer as important as the relationship with the customer. And the company has to be willing to evolve the product around that customer's needs. Or, back to that example of Lamborghini, sometimes it's just about the cup holders, which may or may not be exciting for the engineers to build, but it is what the customer needs. And so this membership economy was really about designing your offering for the people you served.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumi Tech and sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Turing, Upwest Labs, and Hillel at Stanford. You know how everyone today talks about the membership economy and how it's taking over the world? Well, I'm about to talk to the person that coined the term. Meet Robbie Kellman Baxter, consultant, author, and speaker. Robbie is a consultant, author, and speaker, and she's also the author of The Membership Economy and the Forever Transaction, and hosts the podcast Subscription Stories. Robbie has more than 20 years of experience providing strategic business advice to major organizations, including Netflix, Fitbit, Microsoft, and Consumer Reports. She has been focused on subscription and growth strategies for the past decade. Baxter has been featured in the Wall Street Journal and on CNN. She earned her MBA from the Stanford GSB and graduated with honors from Harvard College. Robbie Kellman Baxter, thank you for joining me. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Glad to be here, Michael.
I'm very glad that you're here talking about a term that you coined, which is incredible. And it's something that I've been thinking about for a long, long time. It's something that is, a part of our ecosystem so apparently today. And I can't wait to hear about your journey thinking through it really aggressively. This idea of membership economy and all of these different membership models that are just exploding, in the past 10 years or so. I, as a young entrepreneur, come into this taking it for granted that we have all these different subscription models, especially for SaaS products, but I guess it's not that trivial, and I'm excited to hear from the person one of the people who brought it to us. What is it, and what is it like, and why is it important? So Robbie, take me back a little bit throughout your journey through Harvard, through Stanford, through membership economy. What has been sort of your journey like?
Yeah, so my personal journey, I studied poetry in college. My parents had always told me that my sister and I, if we got into a really good liberal arts school, we could enjoy it and study whatever we wanted, and that we'd figure out our career later, not to worry about it. Which honestly, I have now 3 college-age kids, and that's exactly what we told them, because I think it was very good advice. But when I started working, I was very interested in business, and I quickly realized that there were skills I needed. I worked for the city of New York. I was an urban fellow, working in economic development there. And then I went to Booz Allen to get some training, because the city of New York it was great to a certain extent, but there was no training. And Booz Allen, big consulting firm, great training. And they even told me, hey, Robbie, you need more training. You need some business school, because there are just terms I didn't know. There were just big ideas that were important to business that I kept bumping into. And I'm pretty much a self-starter, but it was really helpful to get that training. And then I spent 5 years in tech as a product manager in Silicon Valley, which is where I live and where I grew up. And I got laid off when I was on maternity leave. And that's when I started independent consulting. So I reached back to my Booz Allen skills and combined them with my product marketing skills and said, I'm going to make a living where I control the work, and the only person I have to delight is the client who's paying me. And so I've been consulting ever since. That's like a little more than 20 years. My 5th client was Netflix. I fell in love with their business model, and I haven't really looked back since.
That's just incredible. And I can already think of 10 different places that I want to take this conversation, but I want to, I promised myself to pick your brain on this thing that you've been, studying for the past 20 years, I guess, this idea of the membership economy. So briefly, can you explain to me really what is this idea behind the membership economy, and what led you to even consider that as some bigger picture idea that we should all be understanding better?
Yeah. So it really started with that project at Netflix. So I came in as a consultant. They asked me to work on some acquisition programs that they had. And I fell in love with their business model. And what I loved was that they were so focused on doing one thing well, which I've come to define as, the largest selection of professionally created video content delivered in the most efficient way possible with cost certainty. And they were really focused on delivering on that promise to their members. They had a member mindset. They were focused on the long term. And what they got from that and from their willingness to evolve their products around that promise and that commitment to the members and delivering on a long-term value proposition is they earned the right to subscription revenue. And subscription revenue is like the holy grail for business. And as I was working with Netflix, I was in love with the model, and I'm trying to take it apart and say what's applicable in other industries. I did a lot of work with software companies at that time, trying to figure out what's similar, what's different, what happens when it's B2B. And as I was falling in love with the model, everybody else around me was too. And I got all of these calls. We want to be the Netflix of, software as a service. We want to be the Netflix of software, Netflix of music, Netflix of bicycles, Netflix of dental pain management, Netflix of you name it. And that's really where it started. And I kept pushing to try to come up with frameworks that were applicable across these different businesses, because I saw how powerful the business model was at driving profitable revenue, predictable recurring revenue, helping companies understand their customers better, getting better valuations with investors and in the public markets. And while a lot of people were coming to me, I was surprised that not everybody saw what I was seeing. And that's really why I wrote my first book, Membership Economy, which I wrote in 2014.
Wow. Okay. So, if we're looking at, even in the tech ecosystem, let's say 20 years ago, during the height of the dot-com, and we're looking at it in 2014, what are key differences? What happened with Netflix that you're saying that you're sitting there and you're saying, wait a minute, there's something else here. There's a different type of relationship that this company is building with their customers that we haven't really seen in the past 20 years.
Yeah. So what I saw with Netflix that got me really excited, I'd been a product manager in a couple of different, what today would be called SaaS companies. So I actually, knew something about the world of software, the world of tech. And in most of those companies, the engineer was king. The product was king. And if a company wasn't using that product well or using all the features, the company sort of said, well, they're stupid. They're behind. They don't understand. Very much like the way if I drive a Lamborghini off the showroom floor, once I own it, it's my problem if I never take it out of first gear, right? That's my problem, not the company's problem. They've already got my money. But with the rise of subscriptions, suddenly the product is no longer as important as the relationship with the customer. And the company has to be willing to evolve the product around that customer's needs. Or, back to that example of Lamborghini, sometimes it's just about the cup holders, which may or may not be exciting for the engineers to build, but it is what the customer needs. And so this membership economy was really about designing your offering for the people you served. They were the members, and you continued to evolve that offering based on what they needed, rather than designing it based on what kind of product was exciting or fun to build or what you'd always built in the past.
That makes a lot of sense, man. And it also sounds to me that another, vertical of this is this idea that if before to sell the Lamborghini, you had one touch point where you had to make a lot of effort to sell it. And once you sold it,
yes,
it's a down payment for basically the lifetime value of the customer.
You're done.
You're done. Now, with subscription models, often on a weekly, monthly, or yearly level, you have to keep selling even after the customer saw everything that you have to offer. And you have to convince them again. It's a much harder sell, isn't it?
Well, it's a good question, Michael, because in some ways it's an easier sell and in some ways it's harder. It's easier because the friction is reduced, right? Instead of having to spend 7 figures to buy and then customize your enterprise software license, suddenly you can configure and subscribe, right? Much easier process to get it up and running, much easier, process to see if you like it. But that's the easy part. The harder thing is you have to keep them if you want to hit that same revenue number. You have to engage them and retain them. So the big game hunter salespeople of the past, aren't as important as people who can find the right customers, qualify them well, because it's not just that first purchase, it's the ongoing relationship. And the other thing that's important are the people on the team that can continue to engage that customer. On the product side, what becomes important is not just your headline features, which are the features that get the customer to buy from you in the first place, but also your engagement and expansion features, which are the features that get them to make it a habit and share it with their colleagues. So, I think a big mistake a lot of companies make is they think that moving to subscription or moving to SaaS or moving to anything as a service is just about repackaging the product. Same product, different pricing structure, different, landing page, but it's the same darn thing. And really, you have to redesign the product in order to be relevant and optimized for a recurring revenue pricing model.
And it sounds like it's not just the product. It sounds like you actually have to redesign the whole structure of how you work on the product, and what expectations do you set both with your engineering teams and your product teams, because those expectations are exactly what drives that that innovation cycle over cycle, right?
Yeah, every person. I mean, it actually. I'm glad you pointed that out. It's every part of the organization. It changes how you sell. It changes how you compensate your sales team. It changes how you market your products, how you talk about them. It changes the role of marketing, because a lot of the marketing has to happen after that initial transaction, not just to get them to buy it, but to get them to use it and engage and expand over time. Changes customer support into customer success, right? And as you point out, changes how you build the product itself. So I think if you want the goodness that is membership, if you want your customers to trust you, to take off their consumer hat, put on a member hat and say, I'm going to keep buying from you forever, you need to earn it with an entire business system that supports that ongoing relationship.
Right. And I'm thinking now about, my generation, and as, we start companies, and I'm watching a lot of my friends start, and it's almost trivial to a lot of them that, of course, they're going to go into a SaaS model or into a subscription model of sorts, because it seems like that almost in any regard is better for you also and as an organization, because it almost forces you to continue innovating, right? It almost forces you to keep being on your toes.
Yeah, it's very good. It results in good hygiene, good business hygiene. You're always improving your product. You're listening to your customer. There is a dark side though, Michael, and I think it's also important to think about this because, I'm old enough now that I know that there's always this continuous swing from one end of the pendulum to the other, and then you go back. And I'm sure that people are like, I have a great idea. What about if you owned it? Instead of subscribing? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Right.
And I think that the issues with subscription, one of them is you tend to get narrower and narrower and narrower in your focus. So what I advise organizations to do is you want to listen to today's members, but you also need to be listening to tomorrow's members as well. So you don't, to use like a music metaphor, you don't want to just listen to the violin section. You want to be focused on the whole orchestra. And that includes people who looked at your offering and chose to go elsewhere. That includes people who used to be subscribers but have canceled. That includes people who are considering you today, who are still in consumer mode. And it also includes your existing members. You'll appreciate this. I had a client that a longtime association, been around for 100 years. They had a guy whose job was to do faxing, like a fax machine. This is 2 years ago.
Wow.
And I said, they were talking about how resources were tight and they really wanted to be more connected with their members. And they wanted to do a lot of digital things, but they just didn't have the resources. And I said, well, get rid of the fax guy, right? And get an email guy, like get a growth person, right? And they were like, well, he doesn't want to do email. He likes doing faxing, right? And this is serious. And they said, and we have several members, including one of our governing board directors, who like receiving faxes. So everybody who liked receiving faxes was over 70, right?
Wow.
And it was taking a whole job out of a relatively small organization of, 50 to 100 people. And, I said to them, it's great that you're listening to your members, but and it's great that you're listening to your employees, but you got to listen to tomorrow's members as well. And none of tomorrow's members are clamoring for a fax machine.
Right. And so where are we headed from here? That's a perfect segue. And I think that, I'm starting to understand a little bit better. It's not just that, young entrepreneurs are coming and they're challenging the incumbents because they're a little bit, more innovative or they're faster, but it's also just because naturally they're tending towards a different model completely, where incumbents have a more difficult time transitioning, even if they understand that they should because of similar factors. But what can I be expecting, in your mind in the next 10, 15 years? Where are we headed, as an economy together? What's happening here?
Yeah. So what I think is really exciting is that organizations are doing a better job of aligning the value that the customers receive with the way that they're charged. So, if you buy a car, let's say, right, that might not be the ideal way to buy a bundle of value, right? Because, you may not need the trunk because you may not have a lot of stuff to carry around. You may not ever need a passenger seat because you don't have passengers. And you may find it very annoying and uncomfortable to have to find a parking space in the city for the car that you only use on weekends, right? So a subscription to, let's say, Zipcar allows you to unbundle those things and then find something else you want, a subscription to Zipcar, a bus pass, a bicycle, what have you. I think I'm seeing organizations take it even a step further. So there's subscription, but there are other ways of providing value, usage-based value, sharing economy value where, we're sharing access to our stored value. Like, I have a car that's sitting in the parking lot. You live next door to me. Why don't you drive it? And you can pay me a little something. And that way we're both happier. So I think organizations need to continue to think about what's the value that my members want and how can I optimize my offering to provide the right bundle of benefits to this audience. So really optimizing your offering around a group of people as opposed to optimizing your group of people around the product. And we're seeing in China, for example, a lot of businesses where they build the relationship with the customer first, and then they continue to layer in more and more value. First it might be a chatting app, and then it might be a billing platform, and then it might be a dating site, and then it might be, commerce. But it's the same person saying, I know this person very well, and I'm going to keep layering in value. And I think that's where we're going.
And it sounds to me that we can pretty much sum up a lot of this conversation around the idea of trust. And going back to the Netflix example, I can simply imagine Netflix tomorrow announcing that they're going into education and providing online schooling. I would trust. I would enroll myself, no questions asked. Even though it has not their ability to provide educational courses has nothing to do with their ability to produce movies, on the paper. But I, as a member, with the trust that I have, I completely understand this, and I think it's fascinating. Robbie, I know how busy you are, and I really thank you for taking the time to be here, and I can't wait to read the books myself. But I have a few fun questions if you're ready for them.
Okay.
All right. We'll start off easy. What was your favorite subject in school? Perhaps even when you were a Girl Scout. What was your favorite subject, going to class?
So first of all, I loved school. And I loved all my classes. I think what was interesting to me in hindsight is that I loved the class with the best teacher, whoever that was. So some years that was English. That was kind of what I really liked the most, if I had a good teacher. But if I didn't have a good English teacher, I liked math. And I also had a great German teacher. So I liked German as well. But always about the teacher more than the subject.
I love that, and I completely agree. All right, second question. One of your role models, if you look back throughout your career or personal life, who is somebody that you always looked up to, whether it's real or fake?
Oh, definitely my dad. So my dad grew up in Brooklyn, New York, went to law school in New York, St. John's, which is, a small law school in New York. And then he worked for, I think, 5 years at a company, at a big Wall Street law firm. And then he and two of his friends decided they were going to start a California Wall Street style law firm. And they were all going to move to California because one of them had gone to Stanford. And so my dad, who had never been to California, sent my mom, and I was 4 and my sister was 1. They had no safety net. He sent her out to California to buy a house and then started a law firm. most conservative person I know, but was willing to take these big risks. And he's the person that I admire the most. And also, he's continued to innovate. You know, he did the law firm for 30 years, and then he started a venture firm in his 60s, you know,
Wow.
a brand new career. So he's definitely my role model.
I love it. Okay, and Robbie, the hardest, but not the most important question, but one that I still love nevertheless. 3 words that you would choose to describe yourself, or if I were to ask anybody, who's Robbie Kellman Baxter?
Yeah, I think they'd say curious, motivated, and a connector or connected. Curious because there's so many things I find interesting. Motivated because, you know, my kids are like, do you ever stop working? Like, I love to work. For fun, I like to work. And connected because meeting people and exchanging ideas is what keeps me going.
I love it. Robbie, thank you so much. I truly appreciate you taking the time for this. I loved all the examples that we talked about. And I know that there is, you know, a ton more that we had in store. And I can think of 50 more questions that I want to ask you, but we'll leave that for another episode. And I want to thank you for taking the time. I know how busy you are. Thank you very much.
Oh, great time. It was really fun talking to you. Great questions too.
Take care. Bye-bye.